I don't think I could do this anymore without jeopardizing me losing all the things I care about in my life, like myself, my wife. I just wasn't a good person, like being in doing something you really don't want to do, and kind of like that kind of shame that comes along with that for kind of like inside of yourself feeling like you don't have enough courage to go out and build the thing you want. It ends up impacting all the relationships of your life. So
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Angry Ginger podcast. I believe this is episode 9, which is pretty cool for personal reasons. It's totally just my goal was to have 10 episodes by August of 2023. And this is episode 9 and it's January. So surely I can accomplish that goal of having 10 episodes by August, but that's several months away. As always, thanks for tuning in and thanks for listening. Um, on this show, what we're trying to do is share some stories that hopefully will either make a positive impact on somebody else, maybe gain some perspective, or nothing else, just hear a cool story about somebody who has either overcome something or gone through a tough time, or is just an inspiration to fight through maybe some tough times or give you some guidance. So remember, there's always somebody going through something that you know nothing about. So choose to be kind and try to gain perspective as you go. Today, man, a couple of cool things about this guest. One, this guest I've known by far the longest of any guest I've ever had on. Also, this is the first guest that I've had on that is outside the codosphere. Now, the codosphere in my life started whenever I was about 24. So this is about 16 years prior to my coda endeavors is where I met this guy. Now, this guy, I grew up playing all the sports with him, and he definitely challenged me more than anybody else that I can think of, from a physical standpoint, but also from just a good dude standpoint. This guy definitely would give you the shirt off his back if you need it. He's also one of the most resilient and tough guys that I've ever been around, which is super inspiring for me. So I played baseball, I played basketball, I played football with him. One of my best friends growing up. Also, super fortunate that since we were so close, his parents had a huge impact on my life growing up, and his dad was one of my coaches in all sports that I did. But was so much more than that as well, not just a coach, but a true mentor to me. So I owe a lot to this guy. Not to mention that he's given up his evening here to come on and tell his story. So I am so thankful and honored and excited to bring on Dr. Ryan Fightmaster to the Angry Ginger podcast. What's up, Ryan?
what is up, Casey Mack? It is an absolute pleasure, man. I think you are like an adopted son to my parents, adopted brother to me. And I gotta say, whenever whenever you joined our baseball team, I think we were 8 or 9 that first season that you joined. I think it was our 9-year-old season. And you joined, and I was the fastest kid on the team to that point. And then Casey joined, and I was not the fastest kid on the team anymore. And I always thought that I'd catch you. And I think all the way through high school, I'm not sure I beat you in too many races, man. You pushed me in so many levels. I think that was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, man. I mean, I just loved going to battle with you and all the way through high school football. And so I'm just so happy to be here, and I've just been really happy to watch what you've been doing in your life with Coda. So cool to be
Oh,
here.
well, thanks, man. It is cool to think back of those times of. I mean, there's not very many times that I can remember in my life where I go into a physical endeavor and I'm like, oh shoot, like immediately, like that guy's going to be hard to keep up with, especially young. Just super fortunate for whatever reason. I was super small, but I was kind of quick, and yeah, I remember being like, oh, Ryan, that's the fast guy. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep up with him, and then that spilled over into so many other things too.
Yeah.
And it was just it was cool to kind of like grow up in that, and just really fortunate, man, that we grew up around so many just good dudes and good parents that really kind of led the way for us. I would be I would be negligent if I tried to take credit for the things that the successes that many of our fellow peers that in that baseball, basketball, football years have led to. So yeah, definitely super fortunate, but also so much fun, man. So much fun. Traveled all over the country, man, playing sports and being silly and stuff like that. So
Oh, dude, we
so
did, yeah, so much, so much time. It's crazy.
I mean, it, I'm sure everybody that listens to this can hear like how genuinely just almost how freaking giddy we are sitting here bullshitting about old times, but I don't even care. We've become those old guys that sit there and talk about the good old days. And you know what? I'm so excited to be to that point in my life.
Me too. Me too. I've been looking forward to this all week. As soon as you asked me, and I was talking to my wife about it, and I was I was sitting out today, and I was surfing, and I was thinking about this, and I thought about this, and this is like last memory lane story, but all the coded people are gonna love to hear this. So in high school, we had winter workouts and summer workouts. To start winter workouts and summer workouts for football, we had a quarter mile all out sprint that was supposed to be a warm up. All right. So this was supposed to be a warm up event where people jog, just loosen up. All right. Casey turned it in to a gauntlet every day. It's like class would end and I would start just already thinking about the suffering because I was like, man, I'm not going to let him win today. I'm not going to let him win. And he won every single day for 3 years consecutively. He came in as the young guy and never lost. It
Oh
was
my God.
insane. I think there was even like a day you were sick and I thought I could get you, and it just never happened, man.
I remember I would get anxious too because then, after a couple times, then everybody's gunning for you. Yeah, and then you build it up. And
Mhm.
I remember Coach Brian Viverka would stand up there. Yeah, and it was we would be on the edge, we'd be on the track. And so for kind of like to picture it, whoever's listening. So we went to a really big high school. So there's probably 80 or 90 of us out there. And
Easy. Yep.
we're on the track and he didn't know which way he was going to point, but whichever way he would point, you'd have to go. And he would look one way and point the other way. And then we'd take off running. And yeah, and it was a super fun battle. And there was many days where I was like, I don't care today. I'm not going to win. And man, as soon as he'd blow that whistle, I'd be like, all right, I can't hold back. But it made it super fun. And it was definitely a good time. But thanks for sharing that. Now people are going to be like, oh, so you're fast. You should run faster than Casey. So, um, so we talked uh, a little background. So Ryan and I, like I said, we played sports growing up, and baseball is kind of like where we started. He actually got me into football. I remember him and his dad were the ones that even made me consider
Yeah.
playing football. And I'm so glad that happened because that was actually the only sport that I kind of stayed with in high school. I ended up pole vaulting, but football was just fun and it was a good challenge and probably not my best choice as far as actual like athletic abilities, but it's what I had the most
Oh,
fun doing. So that's what I stayed with. But through that, growing up, Ryan's a super athletic guy and really big leader. Well, something that a lot of people maybe don't know is growing up, he was actually diagnosed with something. I'll let him kind of talk about it. And how old were you whenever that all started?
I was 8. I was
8?
almost 9 when I got
Yeah.
diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Yeah, so that would have been actually right around the same time that we met. Actually, one of our friends, Cray, I got diagnosed and then I went to his birthday party. It was a Harlem Globetrotters game in Oklahoma City. And I got diagnosed the day before and I went to his birthday party the next day. My parents talk about how that was totally psychotic to let me go do that in hindsight. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that was probably right around the same time we met.
So one of the coolest things I think about just being fortunate to get to be around Ryan and watching him. I remember whenever he got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I didn't know what the hell that was. None of us really did. And it, all through, elementary, middle school, high school, and beyond, Ryan has never used his type 1 diabetes. He's probably kind of embarrassed or frustrated that I even asked him about it. But
Dude, no, man.
I think it's an awesome example of just how resilient Ryan is. And it
Mm.
was not, it was a non-factor. I mean, like I've expressed how athletic Ryan is, but in high school, this guy literally he was my quarterback and would be busting his ass all game long. And in between, when we would go on defense, he would go over there and be checking his blood sugar and then get back on the field. And this guy never used it as a crutch or anything like that growing up. And pretty cool to see. Now, being young and being around him, we hung out all the time, and he would. I remember at one point, weren't you like part of an experiment of like an inhaler or something like that for
I was
insulin?
in that. I was in some it's crazy you remember that. I think I was like one of the first kids in the country to try inhaled insulin. The endocrinologist I had in Oklahoma City, Dr. Copeland, he was just an awesome guy and got me into that trial. So yeah, for a little while I was like out from underneath the having to take shots every day gun. So I got to go do inhaled insulin for I think like a year, and that was pretty cool. But it's funny, man. you said about type 1 diabetes and how it would like never held me back. And you know what's really interesting is as I got older, maybe this will come back up here whenever we start talking some more about what's been going on, but
Yeah.
I never wanted it to be a hindrance. And I always wanted to go chase my goals. And my parents and my grandparents and everybody said that like it's not gonna, it's not gonna prevent you from playing football. It's not gonna prevent you from doing whatever you want. And I heard that. And then I heard that it was like you can't even acknowledge it. It was kind of the way that I ended up handling it myself. And I think over time, what that ended up doing was I ended up maybe not even processing fully that I had type 1 diabetes. And I think I lived in a little bit of denial around that, that I honestly had to process a little bit later into life and ended up connecting into some other things in my like going into medicine journey and all that stuff. So it's
Oh wow. So you
kind of
think maybe the being diagnosed with diabetes kind of started this adventure down into medical school, and it, even though it didn't want to be a hindrance and you didn't want it to be a hindrance and everybody told you it wasn't going to negatively affect you, it still became part of your identity, almost like subconsciously, of like this, well, I'm associated with this medical diagnosis. Like, I don't walk around telling everybody, hey, just so everybody knows, I'm not type 1 or type 2 diabetic, I don't have diabetes, right? But immediately, I
yeah.
mean, even
Yep.
on this
Exactly.
conversation here was one of the first things I turned to talk about. It's part of your identity, and yeah, so I didn't think about that, but yeah, subconsciously how it probably ties in. Well, so where'd you go to college?
So I went to University of Oklahoma. So right after we graduated from high school, I went to OU, studied business, got an entrepreneurship degree. Took 5 years to get the degree because I also added on the pre-medicine prereqs. So I did that, and then I did a 2 year uh, nonprofit commitment at a company called Health Corps, which was the coolest thing. I mean, if anybody's familiar with Teach for America, it's basically a 2 year teaching commitment that's like Teach for America, but it was all health centered. It was founded by Dr. Oz back in like 2008, but I did that for 2 years at an inner city high school in Oklahoma City. And then I went to medical school after that at OU and did that for 4 years in Oklahoma City and then completed my psychiatry residency program at the University of California, Irvine, like 7 months ago. So I've been
That's
in
awesome.
education for a long time, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're definitely one of the few that, well, again, resiliency, like we talk about it, but then you're a sharp dude, man. You're smart. So whenever you went to OU, what was your what you majored in business?
In business. Yeah,
Oh, did you
business.
initially just like, I needed to get a degree because I want to go into medical, or were you like originally wanting to do something in business, or like how'd you go down
That,
that
Casey, that is such a good question. I have no idea how I ended up choosing entrepreneurship. So I was sitting there as a freshman, and like, who has any idea what they want to do in their 18? I mean, some people get bestowed this amazing gift of clarity, but I was not one of those kids. So I was sitting in a business school because both of my parents were bankers, and so I was sitting there looking at the major options, and it was like, do I want to do energy management? And at first, I was like, energy management, is that like a health and fitness business thing? Definitely not. Definitely not. But I saw entrepreneurship and I thought there was something in that that's like that clicked in my brain about creating your life and owning something that and maybe it was even something I wanted to embody that I didn't have at that point, but I was like, I'm doing that. And so I signed up for it. But man, I couldn't sneak out from like underneath the oracle's designation from up above that I had to be a doctor. And so I kind of kept stringing together, like I did all of them, physics, OChem, all that stuff alongside it, and eventually took all the classes that I needed to apply. Yeah.
crazy? Now you were also in a fraternity, right?
I
What
was.
what fraternity?
Sig Ep. Yeah.
SIG. Okay.
Yep.
So
Sigma Phi Epsilon. Yep.
I my experience with uh frat is much different than yours, right? I actually, one of my best friends was actually in your fraternity as well. I think he's
Oh,
like
that's crazy.
a year or two older than you, but
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
so
Well.
that guy,
Yep.
and then that's one experience that I have with it, was not really experience. That's, I guess, it's perspective through him. And then my other perspective is freaking being a cop at age 21 and going and messing with the same guy, like guys that are my same age in the fraternity. So my perspective on Greek life is much different. And so how do you think Greek life maybe impacted you or didn't impact you? Was it fun? Was it worth it? Was like, tell me a little bit about Greek life because I don't know much about it, man.
huge impact, Casey. And I'll just be honest with you, man. I'm so glad I did it, but not necessarily for the reasons you think of. Like the parties were fun. I I loved going down to the river with my boys. It's like I love going to New Orleans. I was like deep in the frat scene. I loved it. It was a great time. There's a dark side to that too. I mean, I think if you're going to join a fraternity and sorority, there's always a risk that you're never going to exit the country club mentality, and you're going to get stuck in kind of this us versus them type of thing. But I mean, I think that happens to people everywhere. But I think for me, it was really cool because I've been going through some crazy stuff lately in terms of my life and, pivoting out of medicine and stuff like that. And I heard from some guys that I haven't heard from in 10 years and had some great conversations, guys I was in the fraternity with. And I think jumping into a fraternity at 18 was big for me because I grew up in sports and I loved that brotherhood that was sports. And so the fraternity, it's not the same, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a good thing, but I can say for some people, I don't know if it would be, and I'm not even sure I would recommend my kids go into it. It's I don't know. For
Yeah.
me, I'm glad I did it, but at some point,
Yeah.
I feel lucky to have survived a few times.
Well, I guess
Looking
now
back,
that yeah, you
you know,
got right. I
yeah,
mean, we all do, right? I mean, whether
yeah,
it's, I mean, I would definitely say that me going into law enforcement was something like, in my perspective, what I thought it was going to be more of a fraternity based. And there definitely is some aspects of that, but then there's also people that you're like, you work with and you're around and you're like, I want nothing to do with that person. And that's okay. And I'm sure it's the same way there.
yep,
And now that I think about it, I did have one of my other guests, he was in a fraternity and he actually texted me just the other day talking about how he's gonna he's gonna talk. He hasn't had good conversations with some of his fraternity brothers, and they went through some stuff in the fraternity, and they just kind of like skimmed over it. They didn't really talk about it. And now years later, they're like, dude, like these are my best friends. Like I need to be. And so they're actually it explains a very similar to how you are, but how like the brotherhood is definitely something that's special. And so that's cool. I like definitely didn't go through that. I went through community college and that kind of stuff. I didn't have that life, but I think it's a cool perspective and hearing, that was a good thing for you and to this day is still a good thing. I think that's cool. Um
I was going to ask you. I wonder if the police department is a little bit like that in some sense. I know it's a smaller class size, and you're not around as many people, and you got tons of people that are older than you and everything. But I wonder if the PD was like that a little bit for you.
yeah, so
You
I
know?
mean, definitely like I said, some of my best friends even to this day are police officers, either were or currently, but our connection and our friendship
Yeah.
started in law enforcement. And I mean, honestly, like if I was in a shit sandwich and needed to reach out to somebody, most people that I would reach out to are probably those in law enforcement that I still talk to from time to time. But yeah, so no, it's definitely similar. The weird thing is that it's all different ages in law enforcement. Like
Yeah.
literally one of my best friends is I don't know, he's probably like late 50s now. And he was a huge mentor for me and stuff. So it's a little different. And then also I know that my personality is different than a lot of people. And I can be, seen or judged as a little bit hardcore. And some people don't really jive with that. But then there's a few that really, that I guess gravitate towards that. And we become really
Those people are missing out. They're missing out.
too kind, too kind. Okay. So you kind of growing up, um, really good like upbringing, a like really supportive family. Holy crap! I just remembered I worked for your grandpa like 2 years on the Christmas tree farm or the Christmas tree sale thing.
Oh
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, I totally forgot about that.
you're one of his favorite workers on the tree lot because I mean so during the holidays he always talks about that. Yeah. So for background, my grandpa ran a Christmas tree lot where we sold Christmas trees from the day after Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve, and he did that for like 30 years. But Casey worked there for a couple years, and we all did in high school. And the majority of us were just over there like pounding chili cheese dogs and root beer. And yeah, again, as having type 1 diabetes, not a good idea. But Casey actually worked. And my grandpa's always like, Casey was one of the few that was actually worth his weight in chili dogs. And so,
Oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot all
yeah,
about
man.
it. So
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
you know, really good upbringing. We went to a nice high school together.
Mhm.
We're really fortunate. Fortunate we got to play a lot of sports. had some good mentors in our lives and stuff like that. And I don't mean to equate like your upbringing with mine. I get the impression that it's really similar to mine.
Absolutely, man.
If
Yep.
there's any standouts, by all means, jump in.
No, I completely agree. Very fortunate the way that we were raised. Yeah.
And so then you get into college, you go to OU, have a good time, get a degree, and then so you go down the route of medicine. Like, at what point did you decide that I'm going to go down the route of medicine? Because you've hinted already at it that you're like, it kind of like, I think you used the term something along the lines of like kind of forced me down the road of medicine, or like it didn't seem like that's where you wanted to go. That's where you felt like you were supposed to go. So kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
I joke around with this sometimes with my therapist, and because I've been talking to her about this for like 3 years, but she or I'll say something along the lines of like going if becoming a doctor was the worst thing that ever happened to me, then I'm in a really good place,
Yeah,
you
right.
know.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
But no, going to medical school and becoming a doctor, it was like a shadow that I just couldn't get out from under. I mean, for better or worse, man, I cared a lot about what people thought about me growing up. I was like considered one of those kids that has, great promise and um, was given a lot of praise for accomplishments throughout my life. And so, honestly, I cared so much about that stuff that I don't think I could ever truly listen to myself and say I don't actually want to be a doctor. Because being a doctor in our society comes along with so much esteem, and you make a lot of money and you have a lot of social status in terms of being able to help people too. I mean, it lined up with so many things that I like doing. I love people, I love helping, I love building things, and it lined up with a bunch of stuff that I enjoy doing. So, and it just felt like everybody around me just always saw me as that. And I never, and I started by the end of college. I think I had a pretty good sense that I didn't want to do it. I wouldn't have gone into the nonprofit if I was committed to go to medical school.
Mm.
Um, but it just, yeah, it was just one of those things that I had a hard time getting away from for whatever reason. And I think I was just scared to go figure it out on my own and scared to go out on a limb. But I mean, I can say honestly that I think I just kind of casually ended up going to medical school, if that's even possible, which speaks to probably some underlying issues,
So, okay, that's
which
so
is
interesting. Okay,
horrible. Yeah, yeah.
so nobody like nobody said like, "Hey, just so you know, Ryan, like you're going to medical school," or like ever really. I guess so. Your perception was like you had this kind of pressure to like be extremely successful because that's the standard that Ryan Fightmaster is, and so part of success in our society is deemed as just what you described that a doctor has of status and good income, secure job, gives back to the community by helping people. Like, so
Yep, yep.
kind of did anybody else put that, I guess, did anybody close to you like put that on you, or was that your perception through all the accolades and success that you had growing up, like, or was it a little bit of both?
It was probably all that,
Gotcha.
honestly. I mean, my parents and I have talked about this so much, because it's no. Whenever I decided ultimately, and we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but whenever I decided to leave medicine back like 7 months or 5 months or so ago, no, it's only been 3 months. It feels like a long time. But we had been talking about it for a really long time, and so it wasn't a surprise to them by the time I did it. But we've had the opportunity to have a lot of conversations about it, and I think my mom would be okay with me saying this. And it kind of does somewhat go back to having diabetes. I mean, a doctor in my life at that point in time, my endocrinologist, one I mentioned earlier, had such a big impact on me because he allowed me to believe again that I could actually go out and do some things with my life despite having a chronic disease that is a lot to manage. And he had such a big force in my life that I think I looked up to him a lot. And I think my parents looked up to him a lot too. And I was having a conversation with my mom a couple of years ago, and this was kind of in the middle of a bit of a breakdown on my front in terms of I wasn't in a good place and I was pretty depressed and just really wasn't enjoying what I was doing anymore. And I was talking to her, and she said, Ryan, I think when I thought about you going to medical school, it would have made you getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes make sense,
Mm.
because it would have all been worth something instead of it just being like 25 years of suffering. I mean, I say that and laugh just because, if not, I'd probably cry. But
Right.
it's like, it's like, and my parents, I think they just had a dream for me too. And I think at a point in life, and whenever you get into adulthood, there is a section in your life where your parents have an idea of what they want from you, and then you have a dream. And at some point, you have to decide when you're going to get off of that well-worn rut and carve something out for yourself. And whenever the medical school inflection point was for me at about 24, I just wasn't ready to stake a claim yet to what
Gotcha.
I really wanted. And I think my parents were, they weren't adamant, but I would say that they were like, expecting I'd go to medical school. And so I had some forces around me, but yeah, man, it's so funny how life has a way of compounding and building on itself. And
Yeah. Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
it's
super
wild.
interesting. That's such a, I mean, a very rational thought as far as
Yeah,
like, hey, like why, from like a mother's perspective of like, man, so many things. I'm super fortunate. Like my son is great and in all these ways, but like, why, why is he the one kid in all of his friend group that has type 1 diabetes at age of 8 or 9? Like, oh, rationalize it by saying, oh, well, this is going to inspire him to be a doctor and help, you know, I'm sure in the very beginning stages, heck, maybe like, all right, he's going to go to medical school and he's going to cure diabetes or something like that,
exactly. Yeah.
like some grandiose kind of like conception. And that, I mean, that's totally reasonable from a mother's perspective or anybody that cares about you. Like that's a very rational thought, trying to, make sense of things that don't necessarily make sense. Um, so I guess now that I'm kind of thinking about it, did you from the day one know that you're going to go into psychiatry, or did you know what kind of medicine you were going into, or what?
Great question. No, man. So at this point in time, whenever I was going into medical school, I was coming off, 2 years working in that health program. And a lot of my peers had adopted a vegan diet at that point.
I
And
got a
so
story on that.
so I'm not trying to bring anybody down on your podcast to start raining vegan love or hate here, by the way. But but so I went plant-based at that point too. And I ultimately did that like for like I think 4 or 5 years. And I'm not plant-based anymore. I eat meat, and I'm cool with where I'm at in my life. But it I think I went in thinking that I was gonna go into medicine and become this like lifestyle doc that through preventative health was gonna reverse heart disease, reverse type 2 diabetes, reverse hypertension, high cholesterol, everything, right? And try to use lifestyle as a means to do that because that's what I love. I mean, I love fitness, I love nutrition, I love all that stuff. And at that point in time, that's what. And so I was trying to kind of like retrofit all of my passions about health onto medicine. And but I got about like 2 years into that, and I started finally getting in the hospital as a third year medical student and seeing that there wasn't a clear way to really do that without a lot of work and effort in those subjects to be able. And then the system doesn't really help you have those conversations. I mean, it would have been doable. I mean, there are plenty of physicians that do exactly that and make a huge impact on their patients' lives. It just wasn't something that I could see myself doing because it would have required me to go through an internal medicine residency and then do a cardiology fellowship, which I knew that I wasn't passionate about cardiology, and I wasn't passionate about internal medicine. That stuff just wasn't clicking. I tried to make it fit. I didn't see myself being a family medicine doc, and seeing patients for 12 minutes per visit. So ultimately, I got to my last rotation of medical school, which was psychiatry, and I still didn't have a specialty selection made up. And literally at the end of this rotation, you pretty much needed to have a choice made. And I was in psych, and I love the subject material, like the idea of trying to figure out how things work and how to help people. And I did love conversation. I mean, my favorite part of like medical school was just talking to my classmates about how they were doing with it all, and so that kind of sprung a little bit of that. And it's really cool to read about. I mean, I think if there was one thing that I was going to wake up and read about every day in medicine, it was probably Freud over, like, say, like um yeah, like post myocardial infarction administration of SSRIs or whatever. But it was yeah, I cared a lot more about mental health stuff at that point than I did anything else. And so that's the shoe that fit best, I would say, as opposed to just leaving medical school, which I didn't even consider,
Oh yeah,
So
well, at that point, yeah,
yeah,
you're like, again, you're gonna. I I can relate. I can't relate on the doctor side, but I can relate to the determination to finish something you start, and that is a
yeah,
great thing in many aspects.
it
And
is.
and I would say that I'm in a similar boat in that I'm not a doctor. I'm nowhere close to that, but I can relate on that sense of like, I finished something simply because I started it, and there's a way to finish, medical school by going through psychiatry. You're still a doctor. You get to check that box. So that all makes sense. But it's very it's very interesting how you started off describing some of your passions. Maybe you should be a CrossFit affiliate owner because I mean you're literally talking about wanting to reverse type 2 diabetes and like
Oh
all the
man.
things you described,
Mhm.
hypertension, heart disease, all that stuff. Like
All of
literally,
it.
if I'm sure at some point through medical school you had to read something on CrossFit, or maybe you didn't, but the low level compared to a doctor, that the training that I have and the experience I have is like to a T exactly what you described. So
It's
that's great.
I mean, one of my favorite things on social media is watching um, physicians do takedowns of health and fitness influencers and like this stuff that they say, and it's but man, CrossFit's amazing, and I imagine there's actually some evidence base that's starting to build around some stuff. Hopefully, I mean, I
Yeah,
imagine there has to be.
yeah. I mean, I definitely, obviously,
You've seen it, man. You felt it. I mean, it's a
yeah,
yeah,
but it's not any. I mean, on one hand you want to give it credit to CrossFit, but it's a healthy diet, exercise,
yeah.
see the sun, go to bed at the same time, drink
It's
your water.
simple.
I mean, the stuff that is super simple but not necessarily easy for folks. So, yeah. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Simple doesn't
Okay.
mean easy. Yeah.
So, congratulations, you're recently married. That's awesome.
Thanks, Case.
So,
Appreciate it,
whenever
man.
I was at your
Yeah.
wedding,
Yep.
now it makes sense now. I was talking to your dad, and he had mentioned something about how like this this first year Ryan is like all in on his wife and making sure that they spend time together and like get this. And so
Yep.
he's going to work like, fewer hours at the clinic or however he phrased it and stuff. And I was like, that's freaking awesome, man. He's like, yeah, he's going to surf like 2 or 3 days a week and, all this stuff. It makes so much sense. Your dad was definitely like letting me in on a little secret of what was to come. And now looking back, I'm like, that's so freaking cool that you have the relationship with your parents through all this, that you can talk to them about it. And your dad told me a story and stuff that of just a personal story about you. And I just was like, dang, this is so cool. Like how close you guys are.
Yeah.
And you've definitely leaned on them to get through this. And while talking to him, he's definitely been inspired by you going through that, which is really cool. Like whenever a son can, impact his dad in a positive way and getting to see that. And now, like now that you explain that, it all makes sense of what he was kind of projecting and foreshadowing and stuff. So you've definitely mentioned already that you've recently left medicine. So tell me a little bit about this. So Ryan Fightmaster graduates high school, goes to college, spends 8, 10 years in medical school and whatnot,
Yeah.
becomes a doctor. And how long did you practice medicine?
Um, I practiced medicine for about 2 months.
2 months. Oh my gosh.
I
Okay,
mean,
so you gotta let us know like what all's going on. What like how did this transpire? I don't even know what questions to ask because this is just so cool. And I'm so pumped to hear this one.
some call it cool. Some some call it an inefficient use of time. Some would some would call it an investment without any return. No, it's no, man. The way that I look at it was, I went to, I got to do 4 years of psychiatry training at a great institution down in Orange County at the University of California, Irvine, and I went into that thinking I'm going to walk away from this. I'm going to practice psychiatry, and I'm going to make it work, and I think it's going to work. It was just kind of the next mirage I needed to, vanquish, so to speak. Um, and I had a great experience. I mean, some of my best friends are in the class that I was in terms of my co-psychiatry residents. And I ended up getting board certification in psychiatry, which I'm proud of. And I love the time I got to spend with my patients. I mean, I think doing therapy with patients is probably one of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my life. And I don't, I can say honestly, I don't really regret it. And I think I just wasn't ready to move forward without medicine in my life until having gone through what I did. I'm one of those people that has to look under like every single stone. I'm stubborn. I got to finish it. So I think whenever I took that part-time job, I thought, okay, come on, Ryan, like you're working 2.5 days a week, working 20 hours, you're making good money. You're getting married. This is a good sustainable way to kind of root the marriage, do something you're not really enjoying, but like in the side in your spare time surf and just like stay happy and da 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 da. But I think I'd lived in such a fractured way for so long that I think whenever I was done, I didn't realize that when I finished residency, I was really done. Like I didn't realize that it took everything in the tank to get there. So whenever I started that outpatient practice and I was seeing new patients every day and starting to build a practice, and I mean you're familiar with it. I mean, it's like you're building all these new relationships as you start a gym. It's that kind of thing. And so, I saw probably 60 people over those first couple of months and was just starting to build up my practice. And man, I was just talking to my wife and she was like, "You're just not okay." And I was like, I don't even know if I knew that I wasn't okay because it just seemed like I was the way that I had been the whole time. I just seemed like I was back to just normal medicine Ryan, you know, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I looked at it and I was like, I honestly don't think I can do this anymore. Um, and I, I don't think I could do this anymore without jeopardizing me losing all the things I care about in my life, like myself, my wife. I just wasn't a good person, like being and doing something you really don't want to do, and kind of like that kind of shame that comes along with that for kind of like inside of yourself feeling like you don't have enough courage to go out and build the thing you want. It ends up impacting all the relationships of your life. So it was one of those things where I think I just had to walk away, and it wasn't anything to do with psychiatry or medicine or, I got friends that love that job. I got friends that are psychiatrists that wake up really excited to go to work. And I talk to those people all the time. And I think they're one of the reasons why I'm not doing it anymore because I just knew that wasn't my life.
Mm.
And so now I'm in the process of figuring that out. But yeah, I don't know if I even answered the original question, but yeah, that
Yeah,
was kind
no.
of how I got there.
So you basically started practicing medicine 5-ish, 6, maybe 7 months ago, and then you
Yeah.
practiced for 2 to 3 months, and then you decide you're going to leave. Now,
So I'll add something to that real quick. So,
yeah.
so you do so I finished med school 4 years ago. And then your first year of residency is your internship year, which is basically like an all hospital year where I did mainly internal medicine in the hospital, which is like taking care of people post heart attack, taking care of people post stroke, taking people, with like diverticulitis, GI issues, and you're like a hospital ward lifer. And so you do that your first year, but then the last 3 years were all psych. And so I think people are like, how did you just like not even, did you not even know? Or did you even have enough experience to know if you could enjoy psychiatry? So my last 2 years of training, every single day, I ran a private practice. So I had a patient panel of 300 for the last 2 years of training.
Holy
And
crap.
I lived that life every day for 8 hours a day for 2 years,
Gotcha.
and got paid a resident salary, which that's how medicine works. Like you're an apprentice, you're
Right.
learning through experience. You can make the money off of it later. And so that's fine. But man, I got the reps in. Like I
Gotcha.
can, Casey, man, I can, you could open up that, the door of my office right now and I could walk outside and do an interview cold with somebody in the ED that's suicidal. And I'd be able to do that interview without even turning my brain on. It's like,
Gotcha.
that's the level of like stuff that we did. So whenever I got out and like, I felt the same way I had been for years. I was like, oh man, I got to get out of this thing. It's time to turn the page, it's time.
That's such a good, like, I mean, I'm glad you clarified that. So you go through 2 years, and in the beginning, I'm
Yeah.
sure it's like, dang, this is like a lot. Like, I don't have to like it yet. I got to learn it first,
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
do 1,000 reps or something. You'll be pretty proficient at it. And then you're like, all
Yep.
right, well, when I get done with this residency, All right, cool. Well, then the pressure will be off. I'll be able to cash in on all my hard work, and it'll be more worth it. I just won't do as many hours. So then I can,
Exactly.
balance.
That was my methodology, man. That's how I rationalized it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes so sense. Well, okay, so this is like been kind of building and whatnot. And so whenever you make the decision of like, okay, like there's got to be a moment. Like I know whenever I left law enforcement, I told people like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna move to Colorado. I'm gonna open a gym. But whenever I typed up that resignation
Yeah.
letter and I handed it to my boss,
Oh
like
gosh.
there's some reflection where you're like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I mean, that is it. And mine's like, all right, I can go back into law enforcement, you know, pretty much whenever. Like, for you though, like you've got all this years and and then we also talk about like your mindset of like, you're not a quitter. So I know like in your mind, this it had to have been, at least I would think so. Like at first you're thinking, I don't want to be a quitter rather than like, oh, the positive side of this of like, oh, I'm not quitting anything. I'm becoming something. Like there's got to be that whole psychological. So tell me a little bit
Whew.
about whenever you made the decision of all right, this is it. I'm gonna do it. And you like take those steps forward to accomplish this.
It's probably a pretty similar feeling to what you had whenever you left. I mean, you're leaving something that like so much of your identity is wrapped up into something you have no idea what it's going to be like. And I'm still kind of in that. I'm still kind of out in the woods, you know. I realize I'm still like in the belly of the well in the like hero's journey, man. But I think I was just I sent that resignation letter in, and there was relief, you know? And I think I just thought about it for so long that I think I felt like I didn't have another choice.
Mm,
Like, I could have gone on and kept doing it, but I think I finally knew that I just wasn't meant to do this job. And it was
mm.
like with such conviction that I'm not sure I really had much of a choice with it anymore. It was really just like either you continue doing this and you know how this story is going to end, which is not good, or you go write a different story. I mean, that was really it. I mean, I was in that spot and I remember I put on my resignation letter and I think it was like the night before I was talking with my wife, and it was like I just like broke down, talking to her and I was just like, I just want a chance to go figure it out, you know? And it's like that's all I wanted was for me to believe in myself enough to go figure out what I wanted to do with my life that whole time and for me to trust myself. And it took 8 years in becoming a board certified psychiatrist to do it, man. But I think, yeah, it was like just a huge, overwhelming swell of emotion, you know?
So
So,
I think this is like a great. It happens every single one of these that I do. It comes up every single time. That no matter what the person, and I've been fortunate. I've talked to so many people throughout my life, and I've had several different experiences on this podcast and hearing
yeah,
their perspective. And this brings up such a good point where like it does not matter who the person is, where they come from, where they're going, or anything like that. Everybody's probably going through something that you don't know anything about. And
no idea.
on paper, Fightmaster is Dr. Fightmaster is the pinnacle of what we think of as like that's the type of person I want to surround myself with and all of these like all of the things that you want in humans. But he's still going through stuff that we know nothing about. On paper, you think that this guy is man, he's living out his dreams. He's living in California. He's a doctor now. This is something he's worked so hard to do. And man, he's put in his time. He's married, like all these things. And yeah, a lot of those are great. But little does anybody know that in the back, you're like, dude, I'm like not fulfilled. Like I'm kind of a shell of who I potentially could be. So like,
That's
yeah,
it.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's exactly it.
I
That
mean,
that is exactly it.
and you know, it's crazy. So I don't know, as you were talking, like maybe the becoming a certified psychologist was what it took for you to be able to take this leap. Maybe that's what it was to be able, because I love hearing you say like I don't have it figured out, but what I do have figured out is that this is not what I want to do, and I'm going to take all of this strength that I have and all this determination that I have, and I'm going to apply it towards something else. I don't know what that something else is, but damn, dude, that is freaking powerful. And anybody can take that story and learn from it and apply it to their personal life, no matter what it is. If it's career, relationships, like that's empowering, man. So like, where do you think you're going to take this story? And like, like, do you have any expectations? Are you scared? Are you excited? Like, what's going through your mind right now?
Oh, Casey, I love that you're doing this. Like, I love that you say that too about like just like everybody has a story because I think it's so true. And adding to that, I don't think what I'm going through is optional.
Mm,
I think everybody has to go through this. And it's like I think what scared the shit out of me is that you get older into adulthood, and I think working with patients in such an intimate way over the last couple of years, you see that it's not just bestowed upon you magically fulfillment, contentment, happiness, meaning, purpose, passion. Stuff just doesn't magically find you. It like you have to, and I think at some point you have to kind of peel back a shell of a person, and this is where therapy was so helpful for me. And I can't recommend it enough if you can really find somebody you love talking with. And I know there's barriers in getting into therapy, but we can talk about that more. But I think it allowed me to let go of some of the aspects of myself that weren't serving me because, I mean, I got to go do this. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in terms of like dreams, man, I know right now that I really enjoy writing. I'm enjoying sharing my story. I'm enjoying connecting with people over this story. It's been crazy since I, put it out there on social media and started the website and stuff that like I've heard from people that you would just never even expect hearing from, exactly how you were describing. I was like, I can't believe that that's what that person is going through right now, you know? And you'd hear it and you'd think, okay, wow, all right, maybe I'm onto something, But it's like I just hope that I can like share my story, and if anybody's stuck, if anybody feels like they're at the end of the rope, and they've kind of been hemmed into this like identity
mm.
hold, and like the psychiatrist with several $100,000 in student loan debt and everything, who's trying to figure himself out at 33. I mean, I'm just, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with it, and it's certainly not going to make money in the short term. But I think I'm just going to try to put the pieces together and see if I can assemble a life that I really enjoy doing. And there's going to be there's tough moments already in terms of just responsibly figuring out ways to pay the rent each month. You got to do what you got to do, and that's I think part of not living in fantasy land. But
Yeah.
it's yeah, man, I think I'm scared, excited, anxious, don't sleep sometimes. But it's honestly like so much better than the life I've lived for the last 8 years that I have to pinch myself every day.
Dude, that's
It's,
awesome, man.
you
It's
know,
it sounds like all of that, all of those unknowns and all those things, like, rather than being like, crippled by fear, it's like motivated by the unknown, and like it sounds like in your voice, like you have a sense of fulfillment that maybe you haven't had in a long time, which, like what's
yeah,
creating
man,
fulfillment, like it's the experience that you're going through, right? And then like hopefully
it
that'll
is.
lead to something where you're that fulfillment you can chase, and yeah, maybe you can create a career out of it or something like that. I know I've talked to Kaylin and I've talked to my business partner Kevin numerous times, and my fulfillment is like the last few years that I've really kind of struggled with. Like
Mm,
I know that I love helping people, and that is like I don't know if that's my why or that's my purpose or whatever, but I know I get fulfillment out of it. But and like the gym, I do get a sense of that, and like so I lean into that, and I know in law enforcement I got a lot of that, and so I don't know where my life's going to lead, but I know that I have to be in something where I'm involved with people. Now, obviously, like you mentioned, you have to be able to pay the rent and stuff like that. So like you got to be sensible about it. But the whole adage of like find something you love to do and do it, and then you never have to work a day of your life. Like that's so true. But I almost think now as I grow up, it's all back to fulfillment. It's not just something
it
I like
is.
to do. There's many things I like to do, but like fulfillment, I'm gonna do even whenever I don't want to do it. And so,
Yep.
like, or if I'm run down or I'm tired or whatever, I come up with all these bullshit excuses. Like, if
Yep.
it creates fulfillment, I'll find a reason to get it done. And that sounds like what you're chasing. And you realize that you didn't have that fulfillment, man. That's inspiring, dude.
Dude, it took a long time to get here, man. There was a moment. this guy, so a neurosurgery resident was giving us a lecture in medical school. It was in my third year, and he said something that was like exactly what you're talking about. He said he was talking about neurosurgery. He gave this cool lecture, showed us like all these like cool surgeries they did and evacuations and like these fixes of like these crazy like arterial venous malformations, blah blah blah. And like all of us were asking him all these questions. Like everybody was like, "Oh my god, I could be a neurosurgeon. I could be a neurosurgeon." And people were just like loving it. And he like paused and he just looked at the audience and he was like, "I'm gonna tell you right now that if you go into neurosurgery, you better love it because if you don't love it, this job sucks ass, and you're gonna hate every single person you did this for other than yourself. So you better love it." And like
Oh,
the whole room was like,
yeah, that's deep, man.
but I honestly think it's a good way to think about big choices in your life. Like fulfillment is so important because it's sustainability. And yeah, you got to be responsible. And you got to minimize risk. I mean, there's real consequences. It's like I'm married now. I need to support my family, and I need to figure out ways for us to still figure out our goals of when we're going to have kids and how are we going to do the things we need to do, and I'll do whatever it takes. But you have to also figure out what that balance is for yourself, and it's a lot easier to do stuff when you love what you're doing. you know
Yeah,
yeah.
man. I just think Ryan, I think it's so cool that you go through all this and one, you stuck it out. Like, you know, there's something to be said for like, on one hand, like, all right, you kind of started recognizing it several years ago, but you went ahead and stayed in it. And some would see that as kind of a negative. I think it's pretty admirable that you're like, you know what? I don't know. I haven't completed this task and I haven't like accomplished this goal and I don't know where I should go and pivot right now. So I'm going to be responsible and I'm also going to finish what I started. Like, yeah. It sounds like, and I've heard you, I don't know that you're beating yourself up about it. You did say you're proud of your degree and you're proud
Yeah.
of what you've
Yep.
done. But there's like a little part of you that's like, yeah, almost like, oh, I didn't have the courage or I didn't have the guts to like leave it early,
Yeah. Yep.
and it's like, there's a definitely negative connotation to that. I think it's pretty damn cool that you stuck something out knowing that like, hey, well, if I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, well, then it's kind of negligent for me to like just abandon this. So like, there's something, but like,
Yep.
you call it stubborn. I definitely call myself stubborn, but like being resilient is something that's, that's a good thing, right? Especially in a lot of things. So, that resiliency has led to this. And now it's almost giving you the confidence of like, if I can get through that shit, whatever life throws at me here moving forward, then I'm going to figure it out some way. And that's cool to hear that confidence and know that you're going to, figure it out. I just, man, like I, I don't think I would have the guts to go down this path with like, yeah, I'm just going to let the universe kind of like, I mean, I'm going to work my ass off at whatever it is day in and day out. And I'm going to bring value to this world. And wherever that leads me, it leads me. I'm like, dude, that is awesome. I don't think I could do it, man.
Yeah,
Like,
dude, it is so funny to hear you say that, Casey, because all right, you were telling me before the show you've almost been at Coda in Colorado for 5 years.
yeah,
And I was in this medicine path for 8. And I cannot tell you how many times whenever I was thinking about potentially leaving along the way, and again, I'm really glad that I finished the journey. I needed to do that. But I thought about what you did, because as an outsider looking at your story, I was like, here's a guy who had a career path in the police department, was obviously very good at what he did. People loved him. I mean, like, just hear glowing reviews about your work down there. And like watching you pivot and do that was like a permission giving assurance that it can be done, you know? And so your story always floated around in the back of my head,
crazy.
no doubt. Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
seriously, I think about it all the time.
Oh, that's cool, man. Well, I appreciate that. I felt, and I guess perspective's everything. I felt like it was yeah, it's definitely a chance, but I was like, man, I got a good business partner that I'm going in with. I trust the guy, like, as one of my best friends. He's also a
Yep.
hard worker. Like he's done it before. Like, I took it as
Yeah.
like, oh, this is pretty safe. Not 100%, but then on the other hand, yeah, I mean, we moved out here. We knew like 4 people, and 2 of them were my business partner and his wife, and the other 2 was my cousin and her husband at the time. So, like, yeah, that is crazy whenever you think of it that
Bold
way.
moves.
Yeah,
Hmm.
right. But whatever. It'll all work out, right? So, and that's cool that you're going through that. So, like, okay, so I think is you don't know where you're headed, right? It's like completely unknown. You're like, I'm just gonna see where life takes me.
I'm gonna see where life takes me. I mean, I've got some interests. I mean,
Okay.
I know some things that I do love. I mean, I still have a business background. I tried to assemble a real estate portfolio whenever I was like going through medicine, which I mean, I have nothing impressive on that regard, but it's something that I can build around. And
Nice.
I like the game of real estate, but I mean, I'll be honest, it's not something that I want to do full time. It's a piece of the puzzle that I enjoy doing. But I think I think I need to try to give myself some space here over the next couple of months to just let the dust settle and get really quiet
Mm,
and make ends meet where I can and just be conscious about not jumping back into the same old patterns again, you
mm.
know? Yeah.
That's really that's empowering. So as you look back, I mean, you have to have some advice, some feedback, something for some folks to kind of take away from your story or some insight. I know you got something for me and I want to hear it. Selfishly, hopefully I hope a million people watch this and get something out of it. But selfishly, I'm asking this question because I want to get something out of it because this is like too cool of an experience, too cool of a story to not get the takeaway. So if you had like one takeaway that you could, or more that you could kind of like think about off the bat, like what's something that you would, tell me or tell somebody else of like, your journey and what you've learned.
I think the moral of the story for me in this regard, it comes to what you were saying a second ago about beating myself up a lot, about not having the courage to jump off the tracks and go figure this out. And I can honestly say that that thought in those conversations didn't help at all. And it probably wasn't until I stopped having those conversations and I started just constructively really trying to understand what I wanted to build, and that was probably about a year and a half ago in terms of trying to just kind of put the pieces together to be able to move out of medicine and just preparing that. It was a very diligent process to
Mm,
make this change. And there were so many times, Casey, that I wanted to just leave and pull the parachute and call it good. And thank God for my wife and my therapist and my family, because there were some people who I think understood that that was an incomplete understanding of what was going on. And I think in those moments, what I was trying to do is I was trying to time travel and undo all the pain if I could just go back in time and erase it all. And you can't go back in time and erase it all, but you have to kind of mourn the life that you have to mourn the life that you didn't live in that period of time, you know?
mm,
And so in that regard, I mean, man, I know I've already said the therapy thing. I mean, it's really helpful. I
mm.
think this is going to go right in your wheelhouse, but I I hired a life coach. So I had a life coach and a therapist to get me to this point, Casey.
I love
So
it.
I did that. When was that, man? That was a little over a year ago. And you might even know this guy. Well, maybe we'll talk offline. But
Okay.
he's a cool guy, and he got me back in the gym for the first time in years. And dude, it like reawakened this part of me that really needed to suffer. Like, I think the ability to push and strive and just raise your threshold set point for me was really important about like what can I tolerate on a daily basis and what can I strive for and why am I doing this? In the mental benefits of going to the gym, I think were like the final like handhold that I needed to like go grab to get myself out of it. And I'm honestly, I don't know if I'd be here if I wouldn't have ended up back in the gym and that did like a first 12-week cycle of workouts. And dude, it was a huge help. I mean, so I think just the physicality of doing that as a guy in my spot kind of opened my brain up again and got me to be competitive, which I needed to be competitive again, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So it sounds like to me like the biggest takeaway. Maybe I'll give you some takeaways that I'm getting out of you telling the story, and it's kind of one of those things. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger says that he says, you can't be afraid to fail. And like
Yep.
if you are somebody who has this kind of like really, we'll call it high status or something that we're like, man, if I fail, like that means I don't just fail. Um, I guess it depends on what context, but if I fail, then like that goes against my identity. I'm not somebody who fails. Like, no, everybody fails, man. And like, no matter how successful you are or how determined you are, or how hard you work, like you're gonna have shortcomings. I'm like, that's okay. It's not really about the shortcomings. It's like, where do you go from those shortcomings? And like, how do you pivot and how do you, make lemonade out of lemons type of deal, that whole thing. And like, you're just a cool story of how um, perspective is not everyone's reality, and reality isn't your perspective. Like what Ryan Fightmaster goes through, and what Casey McAllister goes through on
Yeah.
the surface are like there's totally different things. So, don't judge a book by its cover, obviously. And then, man, uh, chase your freaking dreams. Like life's too short. Like you turn around and now you're 33 and you're like, well, shit, what am I going to do? Well, some people be like, man, you even mentioned it. You're like, golly, I spent 8 years in medical school or whatever. And it's like, no, hell no, man. Hopefully you got like 70 years left of your life to figure it out. That's pretty empowering. Hell, if you're 70 years old, figure it out. Like it's never too late until you're dead. Like go for it, man.
It's all sunk costs. I'm not the same person that I was when we started this podcast. Like it's
Dude.
all and it's like the sunk cost idea in not having to have a perfect plan to start to take action was huge. I'm a perfectionist. I fear failure. And I think that's a reason why I went to medical school in the first place, because it was like a surefire bet to not fail.
Mm.
But I, as soon as I let go of that and I started actually trying to take realistic steps every day, that was huge. It's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have a perfect way. I mean, if you care about it, you'll figure it out. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. I'm trying to get that done. So we'll
That's
see.
so cool, man. That's so cool. Well, where can people find you at? Like, I know you got some writings, you got some newsletters. So tell me about your website and all that stuff, man.
Thanks for queuing it up. Fightmastermd.com. I'm also just at FightmasterMD on any social media platform. So yeah, I write a couple articles each week. Supposed, trying to help people own the ground beneath their feet. Got a newsletter. So yeah, I'm available. I'm open for messaging at any point in time. I'm all ears. So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna challenge you a little bit.
All
Okay.
right.
Now you can say you're still thinking about it, and that is okay to say that. But one of as a small business owner and somebody, I call myself a wannabe entrepreneur. I think one of the biggest things to having a successful business, whenever you're the head honcho of it, I think you have to have a set of core values that you live by and your business lives by. And a lot of people kind of say they have core values or like, yeah, and then you ask them, well, what are they? And they're like, well, I have them written down somewhere. And I'm like, man, I don't know that that's really a core value then. If you have to like go dig it out of a book, like you should be able to. So I know that being at Coda, integrity, progression, and community are our core values. Like we came up with them, like where there's a whole story behind why we came up with them. In my personal life, like values are integrity, progression, and then I say family. And family and community are very closely related. So that's how I try to live my life, and that's how I try to apply it to business. My business partner Kevin's the exact same way, and so like it means more than just words written up on the wall or on a website or something like that. So does Fightmaster MD? Do you have a set of core values, or is that part of like what you're trying to figure out right now? Of like, how do I want to identify moving forward? So give it to me.
I love the challenge, man. And I like your values too. I think that's something I need to develop is a good like goal set of values to make choices around. Um, I think I would say like spontaneously what I think I'm doing is, authenticity, creativity, adventure, and connection. I mean, that is what I want every single day to be about, with what I'm doing, and what I'm trying to put out there for people. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I need to get that. Maybe I can
Dude.
put that. I need as many reminders as I can get to. Maybe I can slap a tattoo on my forearm just so I don't forget.
Do you have any tattoos?
I just got one. Yeah,
What?
yeah, I
No
just got
way.
one.
Oh my
Yep.
God, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
great. Is that top secret or can I
No, no, no. It's right here. Yeah.
what what is it?
It's like right here on my wrist.
What's it say?
It says choose life. So
Let's freaking go, man. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I
Dude.
was that was like right after residency ended, and I think I was certainly trying to remind myself of what was on the table, what the stakes were in terms of this next chapter of my life. I need as many motivations as I can get.
So honestly I was starting to wrap it up, but I got a few more questions now that come up. So
You've been too,
sorry.
you've been too good. You've been too good, man.
um where was I at? Okay, so crap. Now I'm forgetting what I was gonna ask. So one question, I had an actual funny question, but I don't remember what that was, but not funny at all. So whenever you think back, because you mentioned, and I forgot to kind of pry on it. You mentioned that, um, well, I just remembered the other thought, so I'm going to write it down. All right. You mentioned that you went through some like dark times whenever you were going through medical school and like kind of struggling and, kind of having this internal battle with yourself. And you mentioned numerous times that therapy is absolutely recommended and very beneficial for you, which I think is awesome because the ultimate goal of this podcast is to break the stigma associated with mental health. So the fact that a doctor is saying, "Hey, go seek out treatment," is awesome. I love that. Did you ever go through a time that was like more than just like a struggle of like, "Hey, what am I trying to figure out? What should I do?" Like, was it ever like more? I say more in the sense of like deeper or darker, I should say, where it was like more depression or even to the thought of maybe like suicidal or anything like that?
Man, I would say there were 2 periods like that. Um, I mean, I had a period like that midway through med school in the middle of 3rd year, the first time, and then I had something like that again that happened my intern year, and that was definitely the first time I'd ever really felt depressed, you know, where it was kinda like the light in my life just wasn't present anymore, the stuff I really loved to do, I didn't care to do anymore at the time. It was like mountain biking, and I just, like, honestly was stuck in such a place of, like, hopelessness that I really didn't think it would get better. I didn't really see a way out of my situation in terms of what I was dealing with, and, I had a propensity of, really taking my patient's struggles onto my own back, which is something that I needed to, and which again, man, thank God I ended up as a as a psychiatrist, man. Because you really can't do that job without having a therapist of your own. It's like a coach reviewing game tape with you each week. It was amazing. But um yeah, man, I think the first time I'd ever experienced suicidal thoughts was probably during that 3rd year. I think I was so overwhelmed, and I think I was really having to suffer, and we were working 60, 70 hour weeks in the hospital's med students, getting up at the crack of dawn, getting into the hospital at like 5:30 or 6 and leaving at 5:30 or 6, and you don't really see the sunlight, and you do that, and then you got to study all night to prepare for tests, and you do this over and over again for something you didn't really want to be there, but you don't really know how to get out. It's That was the first time I think I'd ever felt that. Um, and oddly enough, what was kind of cool about that was I think the thing that kind of reset me out of that, and I was not in a place where I could ask for mental health care at that point. Um, the thing that reset me is I went on to the OBGYN rotation. Um, and the resident I had, the senior resident in that group, made me deliver a baby, which was really cool, because I think I probably would have sat on the sidelines and just kind of like, just let that happen. Somebody else can take care of that. But she, I don't know, looked and said I needed to do something like that. And honestly, I think the responsibility of having to do that was something that helped me kind of get over the hump and into the next chapter. Um, so my phone's buzzing. I don't want it to interrupt on the
Oh,
computer.
you're good.
But yeah, that was the first time I dealt with that, and then I went through it again. It was kind of cycled back through it whenever I got really tired and exhausted. Intern year when I was in the hospital a lot, and that ultimately led me to go to therapy because I think I had to admit I needed to go figure out what was going on.
Gotcha. Man,
Yeah,
another great example of just never know what somebody's going through, and you also never know how one interaction or one event can kind of change it for the better. I mean, you mentioned the doc challenging you to to deliver a baby kind of helped you get through that. So it sounds silly, but sometimes the smallest interaction with somebody could really turn their day around and ultimately
yeah,
turn their life around, man. So I think it's a good reminder for anybody that's listening to like take a moment there. If you know somebody's going through a hard time, reach out to them. Or even
yep.
if you don't know somebody, you run into a stranger and you're just kind to somebody, man, it can go a long way. The worst thing that happened
Love that
is
advice.
they don't think you're a dick. That's the worst thing that can happen. Best thing that happened, man, you could literally change somebody's life for the better. So
Absolutely, man. Yep.
whenever you're bringing up your values, I thought like one that rings to me, and just I don't know if this is feedback or just something that kind of whenever you mentioned authenticity and being authentic, like, dude, your story is nothing but authentic, man. And so I think leaning into that is awesome. And I think that's a great place to start on your, on maybe your life values or your business values or whatever. But yeah, dude, don't let go of that one. That one's like that one rings true. And then your last one,
Thanks, Casey.
I think you mentioned connection was the term you
Yep.
used.
Yeah.
Like, dude, how whenever you say that, I'm like, that's what I want in my marriage, and that's what I want in my family, and that's what I want in my business, like connection. Like that's awesome. That's empowering. So I appreciate you for that. And that's I don't know, that's cool and thought provoking. So we talked about best advice you can give is, you know what, if you need help, like get help, like seek out therapy and whatever avenue you need to seek that out in. I would assume being a doctor, you would say try to seek out professional help more than, but whatever's going to help you probably works. But
I mean, professional having a therapist is truly different than talking to a family member. It's amazing to sit down with somebody that doesn't know who you are, doesn't know how you function, and has no obligation to take your problems on. That really their only job is to sit there and try to understand you and actually try to get you to some idealized version of yourself that you can't see. So, I mean, it's really cool to sit there in the room and have that each week. So, for anybody who's on the fence with that, go for it. You got to be motivated to go do it. It does take some work, and don't settle until you find somebody you really enjoy talking with. Like Freud said, use the same level of vigor to find your therapist as you would to find your spouse.
I mean,
The person matters.
that's
So
a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I guess
yeah.
being a therapist, that you're in the business of people, so you also get that if you don't mesh with someone, the therapist will probably agree, like, yeah, you probably shouldn't see me. I'm probably not the right person. So that's probably
You got to trust the person. You got to feel like they can honestly help you. If you don't get that in the first couple of sessions, go find somebody else. I mean, that's common in the field. But I think, man, I think the closing thought, as I was thinking whenever you were talking, was just sometimes the best you can do is just get to the next day, and it just always gets better. It's like if you can just keep your head up and just like get past whatever that next wave is, and it just get to the next day. It's like in football, sometimes you just got to punt and play field position, and it's like do that as many times as you got to until you get an opening again. And that was what I had to remind myself every day when I didn't see a clear path. It was like, get up, read a book that is important to me that I want to grow in, and put in some reps, and just it'll get better eventually. So
I've heard it say, whenever I was in law enforcement, um, whenever we were dealing with with mental health patients and especially
oh yeah,
suicide
yep.
individuals, it was like, man, if you can just get them off of the apex or get them off of the very top of the mountain, just one side or the other. You don't have to get them all the way to the back to the bottom and get them in the valley. Just get them off that very top, then you can usually intervene and get somewhat, at least that day, have a successful, like, either save a life or get them some help, whatever it is. Um, and so, like, I think kind of piggybacking what you said as far as like get through that day of like, hey, yeah, there's going to be shitty times, there's going to be low times, man. Like, find a reason to hang on, and it won't completely pass maybe at times, but you can get through that moment to where it's like, okay, a little relief, and then have a little bit better perspective. Because, man, whenever emotions are high and things are tough, man, that's your reality, and it's hard to break that reality. So that's awesome perspective. And uh, I got one more question, and then I'll let you to any free thoughts. You like to read, right? You love books and you recommendations. If you could recommend one book, knowing either for me as knowing my personality, or anybody that you're just like, dude, it doesn't matter who it is, this is the book you need to go read. What book would you tell me to go read? I'm almost done with David Goggins' new book, I Never Finished. I have like 30 pages left. So
I haven't read that. Yeah.
I
You
need
recommend it?
I actually have two that got delivered today. So it'll whatever you recommend, I will put on my third book list to be in line. So give me one that I should read.
I don't think I've ever been asked a question this difficult.
Oh shoot!
This is hard, man. Okay, so you got one book. All right, so I think you kind of I'm gonna not cop out and give like situational books.
Okay, good.
The one book that has stuck with me a lot in the last couple of years that I read first about a decade ago that I reread like once a year is called The War of Art.
The
Not
war.
The Art of War,
Okay.
not the classic.
The
The
war.
War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Okay,
So
I'm putting it on the list.
yep, I
Now that's
love
going to
that
be a
book.
big challenge for me too. You read it 10 years ago?
I read it, yeah, about 10 years ago now. Yeah,
Okay, so
but took
23
me
year
about.
old 23-year-old Ryan, 33-year-old Casey. I might be able to keep up with that vocabulary if you can read
Oh,
it.
get out of here, man! Just get out
um,
of here. You're crazy.
okay. So, I mean, honestly, I could sit here and talk to you all night, and I I probably will whenever we get done. But is there anything else? Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to like share with the audience, or just literally anything? You have the floor to say, or um, advice, whatever, man. Just if you have anything, let's hear it.
Oh man, I know we're kind of closing out on the kind of the what to do in a dark spot thing. But again, not medical advice. I'm just, I'm nobody's psychiatrist here.
Right.
Um, but honestly, I didn't really. I thought this was kind of a like tongue in cheek advice to tell people to call the suicide hotline. But if it's truly in a spot where you can't get better and you're really not, and you feel like you're in a bad spot, the people who work that are really good. Like I've had a lot of interactions with people who have called it and people who work that hotline, and they're really good. And like just because you call the hotline, I mean, it's just a conversation typically. So I think that's just an underutilized resource, and it depends on the state, but I can't remember the new number that it is. But all you have to do is just Google suicide hotline. But that's just a low hanging fruit option for people. But yeah.
What a unique experience or unique perspective. I've never talked to anybody that I know of that's called it or had any advice or feedback on it. Dude, that's awesome. Like that is something, as somebody who's trying to break the stigma associated with mental health, I should have on every episode talking about like, hey, here's a really easy resource, completely free. Reach out. If you have a phone and everybody has one, then freaking do it. Man, that is such low hanging fruit. I need to give myself a slap and get that
Oh,
better.
oh,
That's
dude, man. You, oh man, this is stuff that doesn't even get recommended often by psychiatrists. It's just underutilized for
gotcha.
sure. But I
That's
think overall, Casey, I just want to say I'm so proud of you. I'm just like happy to be on here with you, and I'm just really grateful that you allowed me to join you and talk about our adventures a little bit, and let me share my story. So I just can't wait to come work out with you at Coda.
Dude, I can't wait to have you in for a workout. We'll put something in there. Well, I'll talk to you about what do you think you're good at. We'll make sure it's a good workout for you. So I won't make you do all like heavy snatches or something like that. So
Yeah, no heavy snatches for me. I think no,
shoulder.
no no snatches, man. Maybe just squat and shoulder press, but
Love it.
we'll
I'm in. I'm in. We'll, we'll do it. Well, Ryan,
sounds good,
thank
man.
you so much for coming on, man. And hopefully somebody listens to this and takes your advice and takes your story and learns something from it. Remember, our goal here at Angry Ginger Podcast is to break the stigma associated with mental health. So if you're going through a tough time, reach out for help. If you know somebody's going through a hard time, reach out to them or find somebody who they can talk to and get them through that tough time. And then remember, like everybody's going through a tough time that you know nothing about. So choose kindness over being mean. And thank you everybody for listening. Ryan, thanks again so much for coming on. And oh man, I can't wait to hear your story. We're gonna have to do an update story later on in like maybe a year or two to see where you're at, man.
Anytime, man. Pleasure has been all mine. I really enjoyed this. So thanks for having me.